All right, so hi, my name is Lauren. I am a PhD student at the University of Toronto, and I want to begin today by stating that I have been conducting my research and I currently conduct my research in Toronto, and that's the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, Haudenosaunee, and Wendat peoples of Taigaronto. And I am honored to be presenting today on the lands of the Timucuan and Seminole. So today I'll be presenting my research paper, Voicing the Non-Human, Exploring the Affectual Relationships of Sonification. And I am at the early stages of this PhD research, so this is the start of sort of an exploratory inquiry, merging voice and sonification and what happens when we do that. So I want to begin by bringing you to my initial interest with this topic. I purchased PlantWave in the summer of 2022, and attaching these sensors to my favorite prayer plant, I was immediately greeted with a rhythmic major melody, which was a tune I had assumed to be indicative of a healthy plant following my years of classical musical training. But after an hour of sonified listening, I noticed that the tune began to shift. It was lower in pitch and slowing in pace. And within minutes of the sonic transition, my mother yelled from the other room, "What's wrong with your plant?" So put simply, this audible cue became a communicative signal through which my mother was attuned to what she had considered to be the plant's shifting expression of needs. And it is here that I began my inquiry. So by analyzing sonification as a form of voice production, I'm interested in considering how it might illuminate the affectual experiences that are both ascribed in the data mapping, which is a point I hope to pursue in future research, but also emerge from personal listening accounts and the designer intentions, which is what I'll touch on today. So I wonder, through this use of data as a communicative object, how do colonial logics of agency emerge? How might this vocal relationship through sonification alter the affectual experiences with data? And what might a destructuring of this logic through specifically anti-colonial perspectives offer in understanding these as a form of voice? So to situate this research requires first a clear foundation as to the definition of voice, which we know is very difficult to define, as there are numerous definitions across disciplines and cultural histories. So physiologically, voice has been linked to the human body, historically as a process of creating an audible signal through numerous resonant chambers and body parts. However, recent scholarship suggests that this biological approach is often rooted in ableist perspectives that suggest voices are supposed to work in certain ways, while also assigning a very universalist conception of the body. Culturally, we've used the term voice to describe forms of inequality that emerge from silencing of groups or their presence and power outside of different norms of organization. Philosophically, voice has been studied as an object of discipline addressed through linguistics, ethics, politics, and phenomenology. And then technologically, voices have been explored as crafted artificially. We've seen this in humanized, often feminized voice assistants. So collaboratively, I'm interested in broadening this definitional underpinning and considering the concept of voice beyond the human. And Dylan Robinson describes this possibility as an intersubjective experience between human and non-human actors by considering object agency in non-representational and new materialist theory alongside Indigenous knowledge regarding non-human relations. So to expand, one of the ways that he explores this is through a consideration of space. He says to acknowledge spatial subjectivity means addressing the ways by which space exerts agency, affect, and character beyond the realm of striking aesthetic impact. And in certain cases, it may mean experiencing it as a partner or kin. It means rising to the occasion of full participation within interactions between other subjectivities, including musical and human actors. So using this framework to consider sonification as voice production requires a repositioning of sonified data by considering its development as a humanized form of spatial subjectivity, and analyzing these types of sonic production as this crafted negotiation between a human and non-human actor. So this approach to exploring voice ultimately aims to situate the experience of listening to sonification within an ecology. Again, to quote Robinson, he says, to wrest listening away from its standard conception as a largely human and animal-centered activity allows us to understand listening as an ecology in which we are not only listening, but listened to. So in this first part of my much larger project one day, I'm interested in considering how voice denotes these relational understandings and affectual responses, because at its core, voice is an amplifier of affect. It doesn't only amplify emotion, but it shapes and produces the emotive responses for both the speaker and the listener. Kanjizer shares that the voice in its expression of effective and ethico-political forces creates worlds. So through a choice in aesthetically driven formations relating to timbre, tone, duration, pitch, the listener is encouraged to move beyond how something is made to sound, beyond an aesthetic, to find an embodiment in a reception of meaning. And it is here that I want to move into a few examples to listen to sonification and think about some of the affectual responses that have emerged for listeners or are described by the project designers. So the first I've called Cries of a Black Hole. NASA published the sound of a black hole at the center of the Perseus galaxy cluster on May 4th, 2022. Extracting what they report as pressure waves recorded from this phenomenon, they say that the signals were then resynthesized into the range of human hearing, scaling them upwards of 57 and 58 octaves above their true pitch. And the final project was published across various social media sites as a 35-second audio clip. And as space remains out of reach and mostly unexplored, it is through these forms of data reimagination and sonification that we're able to perceive new ways of understanding our unreachable aspects of our galaxy. So let's take a listen. Spooky. So through this project, Sonification offers a terrestrially bound specific set of ideas. Let me see if I can switch slides. There we go. A specific set of ideas that make worlds understandable to us based on mutually agreed upon relationships to the material world. So shared online, many responses were emotive. One professor, a Northeastern physics professor, shared in an interview that his perception of this project and black holes in general is that they are these giant unfeeling places where mass can never escape. And there's something deeply horrifying about that in a philosophical sense, and the sound matches that experience. But across other social media channels and comments, listeners echo the same sentiments. And I've pulled these just from that video. So they're saying that it can be likened to the sound of a horror film, that it embodies some sort of mystery that only is audible to our pets, or it also evokes a sense of existential dread. So this sounding might evoke feelings of unease as we grapple with relational understandings of such non-visual cues with a mass that's known for destruction. And importantly, this affectual experience emerging from sonification, it reorients our view epistemologically, culturally, politically, and creates this sort of off-Earth perspective. And the voice of Perseus's black hole repositions the listener into what I call a new celestial being. But returning to Earth, and my initial interest in this project, sonification has widespread use in music production, wellness sectors, artistic practice, and one of the tools that I described earlier is Plant Wave. In its recent design, it's a portable mobile sonification device. It was developed by two musicians, Joe Patitucci and Alex Tyson, and they are the founders of the Zero Waste record label Data Garden, which had a mission to help people connect to nature through electronic music. So wanting to prioritize a generative relationship with plants and bioart, the progression to integrate data sonification into their label was a very natural shift. And at its foundation, PlantWave sees voice as connecting nature directly to the instruments themselves with technology and allowing the plants to become their own singers. You can listen for a few hours on YouTube. But the designers of PlantWave described that the plants will actually react and respond to a variety of changes in light, time of day, oxygen levels, and even in response to movements in the room. So returning to Robinson here, I'm reminded of the aims to wrest listening away from a human-centered activity and to perceive listening as an ecology. So the founders of PlantWave suggest that musically we can hear this relationship, and as such, this listener and the speaker, they're shifting and evolving melodically. So they describe this tool as hopefully allowing plants to sing in the aims of fostering an appreciation that may one day help us learn more about the world around us. And the last example I want to share is sonic kayaks. This is a project that engages paddlers to map and collect data related to water temperature, turbidity, underwater sound, and even air particulate pollution. So sonified in real time, this project allows the paddler to listen to the data that they're collecting while also engaging in forms of scientific citizen engagement. And this process integrates the listener directly into the development of this voice and musical performance through changes in speed and destination, among other spatial and temporal factors. And here, affect is amplified by placing the process of data collection and sonification into the boat itself. So users might hear sounds indicating a temperature gradient that may force them or kind of encourage them to paddle to a different area or to pause in that space. So this is a short clip of a water temperature sonification tool. So considering their intended listeners and users, the sonic kayak designers note that they see particular opportunities for communities to use the system to highlight port practice and lobby for environmental protection. But this technology has also been used as an accessible navigation tool for visually impaired users, translating GPS signals into audible cues. And one user shared that the presence and use of sonified data granted them a new form of independence on the water, allowing them to paddle without needed guidance or supervision. So collectively, these case studies point to ecological, social, and affectual changes that emerge through the translation of data into communicative sonic relational experiences. We see building empathy and listening ecologies with plants and PlantWave, translating complex data and inaccessible locations into widely accessible forms of knowledge with maybe just a bit of existential dread with NASA's black hole, and then also encouraging environmental data collection and ecological activism, while also offering accessible navigation with user-led sonification through sonic kayaks. But in sum, as beings largely influenced by these forms of affectual experiences and voice as communicative relations, the process of developing a sonified voice for the non-human opens new forms of knowing. However, it also masks forms of ecological agency through certain affectual mapping techniques, which is an area requiring further research. But importantly, this preliminary uncovering of affectual responses of sonification and project design points to the shifting relationships that are audible when analyzed as voice. Thank you.